My name is Andrew Hunt, and I'm the writer and director of Frostbite. I grew up in western Pennsylvania. Actually grew up about 15 minutes away from the graveyard where George Romero shot the original Night of the Living Dead. Let's just say that zombies is something that western Pennsylvania is very proud of, and the filmmakers and writers from that area, I think we all feel that we have to somewhat make a movie about zombies at some point in our career to kind of pay homage to where we came from. One of the interesting things about zombies for me is not the apocalypse. Like, that part I've seen a million times, and I really have no interest in actually remaking that. I find it really interesting that the actual zombies themselves are actually probably the least threatening movie monster that we have in the cinema canon. You know, zombies aren't smart. They're not fast. They're pretty easy to get around, to escape from, but yet somehow society, we completely believe that the zombies would overrun us and overtake us in any zombie movie that you've ever seen. Like, we just accept it. And the question really is why? If you see a werewolf coming at you, or a creature from the Black Lagoon, or a vampire, well, those are monsters. Those are creatures. They're beasts, like you would see a wolf or a bear coming at you. But a zombie's different, because a zombie is a person. At one point, they were a person. You know, the question is, how do you pull a gun and shoot your own brother, or your own father, or mother, or wife, or husband, or God forbid, kid? I think that's where they kind of beat us. I think that's their weapon. Their weapon is our own empathy. You know, we really don't want to believe that they are these mindless, machines. We want to really believe that maybe they're still in there and they just can't communicate with us. I think another reason why we kind of can empathize with zombies is because they have two aspects of us, These are human beings that are dealing with disease and addiction. And I don't know anybody in the audience who hasn't dealt with that in some way, shape, or form, either it themselves or with a family member, I mean, I think if we did the percentage of how many families have dealt with cancer, I think it would be probably 80 to 90%. And the same thing with addiction, whether it be a chemical addiction or a psychological addiction. I mean, I think we're used to these. We deal with these on an everyday basis. So I think that's one of the reasons why we can also kind of relate to a zombie. I was really, really excited when we started making this, working with this young talent, Louisa Dar, who I just think is just a fantastic actress. This is, ironically, the first time that she's ever been on camera. She's done a lot of theater, but has never really done a film before. And so working with her was an absolute treat. She was just so excited to be there, just soaked everything up like a sponge. And if she had a question, she wasn't afraid to ask it. I mean, it was just, I really felt like I was actually directing like a 40-year-old seasoned pro. This is our second zombie here, Trevor Keith. He's just a great actor. And so it was a lot of fun to just kind of put a shit ton of makeup on him and just make him look terrifying. This was one of the things that we kind of wanted to play with in the movie, is how would zombies treat one another? And it's something that I've been called out quite a bit on, where people have said, well, I've really never seen two zombies fight one another before. And it's something that I'm really proud of just kind of playing with that idea. It's kind of like treating zombies as if they're like feral dogs and they're fighting over a bone. I thought that would be an interesting approach, because we want the brother, our main zombie, Rod, which I'll talk about in a second. We want him to almost kind of feel like he's protective. But in our whole mindset when we were making the film, I'm like, Rod, you're not protecting your sister. You're basically telling this other zombie, hey, dude, back off. This meal's mine. Another person to really kind of talk about is Emily Kaplan, who is the production designer and the costume designer for this film. We were in a coffee shop months before we even shot the movie, and I was describing what the young girl would look like in all her garb. And Emily's just kind of sitting there with a paintbrush in her hand, listening to me going, okay, okay, okay. And then about 15 minutes later, she flipped the card around and said, what do you think of this? And that was the lead character. It was just perfect. And she even painted this puppet glove on the character, which any good director knows, if someone gives you a great idea, steal it and use it. And people think it's your idea when clearly it wasn't. It was all Emily's. You know, one of the really cool things about making a zombie movie is you get to play with a lot of really, really amazing artists. And one of them is a gentleman by the name of Ryan Shadley, who is a visual effects makeup artist. And so it was really, really cool when we were starting to conceptualize the idea of, you know, what the zombie would look like in like a frozen wasteland. And, you know, we brought Rod, the actor, into Ryan's shop and was doing a bunch of testing and different things to just try to find a unique approach. And what I always love is all the little ice crystals that are over Rod's eyebrows or his you know, chin. And that actually all was, I think, salt, like big chunks of salt. Now, we'll talk about Rod, who I just think is pretty much like the soul of this movie. Rod was an actor that I've seen work in a bunch of different short films, and I was always really impressed with like his performances. There's a lot of subtlety that he brings. And so reached out to him and said, you know, I'd really love for you to be the zombie in our movie. And Rod was totally up for it. It's the things that Rod just does with his eyes. It's just the subtle details that he does, which really makes you kind of fall in love with him. You know, I say this right as he's drooling blood, but I don't think the audience ever feels that he's the enemy. I think that they just look at him as kind of like almost like a feral animal that is kind of following this kid. I think there's one shot that kind of is happening at the end of the movie where I think that's when the audience really just kind of falls in love with Rod. And Rod was one of the easiest actors to work with. Like, I always joke with actors when I say I love actors that I barely have to talk to on the set, because as a director, you're dealing with a million other things. And Rod would, we just set the shot up and Rod would just kind of play in it, and I'd make a few little tweaks and we were off to the races. I think one of the really unique things about this movie is the casting when we look at ethnicity. You know, we have an Asian American lead, we have an African American lead, and I think it's really great where the audience is kind of a little... I don't think they just see the connection. I hope they don't see the connection at the beginning of the movie. It's right here where you start to realize, wait a minute, this is not just a girl and a zombie. You know, this is a girl and her brother. We shot this scene in we had 30 minutes of sunlight, and we were racing to try to get it done. And I'm just so impressed with what we were able to capture. But it's this moment right here. This is the moment that I just, you know, that when we were showing it in theaters, that I was hearing sniffling and wasn't ever really expecting that. But when you hear that at an audience, you're just going, Jesus, wow, we're making people cry. Again, great acting. This is the first scene that we shot with Louisa, and she just knocked it out of the park. And for anyone who's noticing, yes, she is wearing a Pittsburgh Pirates hat, and yes, that was done on purpose because I got a shout out to my peeps. And then finally, we have Paul Metzger, who did the score and just did a gorgeous job on the score. I think it's, again, he just brought so much soul and truth to the film. But yeah. So, hey, thanks for listening to me ramble on for 10 minutes, and have a good one and stay safe.